you noticed about Isolo's use of Edey in the last few games, and really maybe the attitude that you've seen from Edey?
Yeah, well, I just tried to jump in there before Isolo got to talk about him. So very exciting, obviously. 21 rebounds, I think that's the thing that stands out. And the way that he's played, especially in the interior over the past couple games. I mean, I think against the Pistons, obviously, really impressive. Now, Detroit's big man, Jalen Duren, obviously a former Tiger. He didn't play in that game. He's one of the best rebounders in the league. And so that's a reason for it. Let's just, we gotta
What
put
it
that out
is,
there. But
yeah.
at the same time, yeah, well, also you got to give love to the former Tiger. So two birds with one stone there. I think the way that he's played, it's been different, and I think that's something that the last couple of games, or there was a while there during this season where there's been stretches, and even right before Taylor Jenkins got fired, where Zach Edey was he was struggling, right? You could see it on both ends of the court. He looked a little bit lost. He wasn't really involved in the offense, especially with the way the Grizzlies have been playing offensively this year. And then there were a lot of games where he looked like he was kind of getting exposed defensively. And I think fans were starting to get concerned, right? He was kind of falling further and further down the pecking order. He wasn't starting anymore. And that's one of the changes that was made right when Tomas Isla came in, is that he put Zach Edey back into the starting lineup and he gave him a really big role. And so he's been playing that role over those past couple of games, and the rebounding has been really impressive. I mean, double-digit rebounds, I think 4 out of 5 games that he's played since the coaching change, and I would expect that to continue because he's been around the basket more, and he looks more energized, and he looks like he's playing a more active role in the offense. And I think it's important there, the 6 assists, like that's a big deal, especially for somebody who most of the season has not been getting that many touches in positions where he can get assists or pass the ball to somebody else, right? It's just like, let's get him the ball for a dunk, or he gets a putback or something like that. And so the way that he's been a playmaker, that's obviously something that we saw from him in college, where he was the focal point of Purdue's offense. That's really impressive, because if they can unlock that part of the offense, I think they can really do a lot of things, and it will help a lot of the other guys out, especially on the perimeter.
Yeah, you make an excellent point. So really all around right there. Let me quickly say hello to everybody who's joined us on the live streams. Apologies, we had some technical difficulties there. But talking about the weekend the Grizzlies have had, and particularly what Zach Edey's been able to do here the last couple of games. And to your point, Jonah, I think he has looked energized. You can kind of tell. We spoke to him in the locker room the last home game, and he kind of mentioned, he felt like he was getting put in positions to be impactful, especially with the pick and roll. And yeah, they're not using the pick and roll every single game, right? But I do think there's definitely been an uptick, and there's been a noticeable kind of uptick here in the last couple of games. I think what I really noticed the most was, especially in that Pistons game, like Isolo is using Edey down the stretch, and I think even though Zach has started a lot of these games, we haven't really seen him close a ton while Taylor Jenkins was the head coach. And I think it's kind of become something of a necessity, right? Because they lose Brandon Clark here in the last stretch of the season. And so ultimately you're wondering, like, okay, what is the Bigs rotation going to look like? Now, granted, in the Heat game, they did close with Santi Aldama, able to stretch the floor a little bit more. But they go to Edey because of the noticeable size advantage. You mentioned Jalen Duren not playing in that Pistons game, but his ability to just not only be a big body, but just be an energetic and really big body. I really see maybe some Zubac in him, from the Clippers in his future. It just seems like he's definitely kind of figured out a space and kind of carved something out for himself here as we go into the kind of final stretch of the season. We'll see what he's able to do. Let's kind of talk about what the Western Conference is looking like. Tighter than teeth when you don't floss. These are currently 4 teams tied at 46 and 32, what is essentially the 5th seed. The Denver Nuggets are in 4th place, but they're only a half game up on all of those teams. Golden State, the Clippers, the Timberwolves, and the Grizzlies make up 5 through 8, all at 18 games back of Oklahoma City. The Grizzlies have 4 games left, and kind of the easiest way to think about it is that 2 games keeps them alive to avoid the play-in, but not really a guarantee. And then you have the records against 4 through 8. They're winless to the Clippers. They lost the tiebreaker to the Warriors, but they're 2-0 on the Wolves and 1-1 with the Nuggets. They play both of those teams this week, meaning they got a good chance to gain some ground. There's the graphic we were looking for. They play the Timberwolves on Thursday. They'll play the Nuggets on the road on Friday. Jonah, how do you see the West shaking out? And in particular, what do you think about these last couple of games that we got going against in the head-to-head?
Yeah, well, some of these I've been seeing on like the past couple of days. Everyone's throwing out these like multiple team tiebreak scenarios. I'm sure you've seen them too,
Yeah.
and I don't even know where to start with some of the 4-team tiebreak, 5-team tiebreak, because usually you just think about it like, okay, well, the Grizzlies have the head to head over this team or that team, but it's not even going to matter because, like, for example, the Timberwolves, right? Even if Memphis loses on Thursday, they'll still have the tiebreak 2-1 over them. But then if you end up in a situation with a 4 or 5-team tiebreak, it doesn't matter who you are,
Throw all that out of the window.
1-to-1 against that team. Yeah. So, and the thing is, I think the one thing that you can kind of take away, and I don't want to, obviously, we don't need to spend time every single scenario because that would just be the whole show and nobody would be interested in it. But uh, the thing that's kind of gone throughout the season, right, is the Grizzlies have not played well against good teams, right? And these teams ahead of them or that they're tied with are good teams. So when you look at these tiebreak scenarios, if you end up in a situation, this is just speaking broadly, end up in a situation where you're tied with a couple teams, one of the tiebreakers is your record against those other teams. And the Grizzlies are one of the reasons the Grizzlies are like eighth, I think, right now, even though all those teams are tied, is because they don't have a good record against good teams. And so a lot of these tiebreak scenarios with multiple teams end with the Grizzlies kind of being below these other teams because of that. And so that means you've got to win, you've got to put yourself ahead of them. Now, a lot of it you can control your own destiny, right? Just beating the Timberwolves on Thursday or winning out and beating the Nuggets, then you'll put yourself ahead of those teams. If the Grizzlies go 4-0 this week, they'll kind of ensure that they're ahead of those teams and they won't have to worry about it. So those 3 games are huge. Obviously, like I said before, right, the Charlotte game you have to win. That's if you lost that game, it would be pretty cataclysmic given where Charlotte is this season. Then the other games, they matter a lot to these teams. And boy, the Thursday late tip off against the Timberwolves, fly to Denver and play the next night against Denver. The schedule makers were not kind to Memphis in that one. That's going to be a really tough back to back, and I think will tell us a lot about this team.
Yeah, I think you got to be encouraged at least a little bit, especially with these last couple of games. I think if they would have kind of continued their trend of not beating plus 500 teams, especially when you talk about that Pistons game, I think you're probably settling almost for them to be in the play-in. Now you've got a little life here if you're the Grizzlies. You're talking about playing a Charlotte team that is not good. They're not playing for anything. I think they've shut down LaMelo Ball for the year as he kind of figures out what's going on.
They're actually playing. They're playing to lose. So
yeah,
that's even
they're playing
better.
to lose, right? They want
Yeah.
they want better lottery position, right? So they have nothing to play for. And then you're talking about playing 2 West teams where the two you're 1-1 against the Nuggets, but you didn't play either of those games with Nikola Jokic, right? But I think you had to be encouraged by having the 2 wins against the Timberwolves. Both of those games kind of came down to the wire, right? But the Timberwolves are a team that's playing a lot better. So I think you get a win over the Timberwolves, you maybe lose to Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets. You don't want to, but no harm done necessarily. You want to hope you land maybe in that 6th spot, and you're just avoiding the play-in at kind of at all costs. And you make a great point. Either way, they've dug themselves into this hole because they haven't been able to beat any teams above 500 before Saturday since early February, and that's just inexcusable, however you want to put it. But you got to hope that they can close these things out. You're talking about having those games, Timberwolves, Nuggets, and then you close the season with the Dallas Mavericks, who somehow, some way have put themselves at least in the conversation for the play-in, right? I think there's a scenario here where we talked to maybe before this stretch where you're like, if they end the season, 5-1, that's probably absolute best case scenario. It looks like maybe, in my estimation, maybe a 4-2 kind of stretch. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, that the win against the Pistons was encouraging because it was against a team over 500. Cade Cunningham played in that game. He'd been out for a couple weeks, and he played, and the Grizzlies beat the Pistons on the road without John Morant. Like that meant something, and I think that gives you confidence, especially if you're going to that game on Thursday on a 3-game winning streak. I think, to me, like that's the game that everything is going to kind of hinge on, is the game against the Timberwolves on Thursday, because like you said, this is a team that's been playing a lot better than the last time we saw them when they were here on MLK Day against the Grizzlies and kind of melted down the stretch. But if the Grizzlies lose that game, like I said, then you're going to a back-to-back with travel the next day against Nikola Jokic and the team. Again, the Nuggets have been struggling, but they're going to be probably favored in that game. And so if you're coming off a loss, I think it's going to be difficult to regroup for that one because there's so little time, and it's just going to be a difficult kind of schedule game. And then the last game of the season, if you lose those 2 games, you might already be in a position where you need help or where you're going to end up in the play-in. And I think that has to be the key right now is just no matter what, get in the top 6 so you don't have to worry about the play-in. Because not only do you not have to play that week, but also then you're going to have a couple days off before the playoffs start. And for a team that just has a new coach who started a couple weeks ago, having a couple days to prepare and to implement some new schemes or techniques or whatever it is, that's going to be huge. Because if the Grizzlies have to go into the play-in, play potentially twice that week, and then go straight into a playoff series, it's just like normal, and you don't have any time to prepare or to do anything different. And so then it's hard to see how they're going to be able to implement anything that's going to help them play really differently at all in the playoffs. And so I think that's got to be the goal is can you win that game against Minnesota? That would give, it just feels like that would give them a leg up, obviously, on the Timberwolves. Then they would have the tiebreak and be a game ahead. And then you'd have a lot of confidence going into those last 2 games and a real shot to get out of the play-in.
Yeah, all excellent points, Jonah. I think your point, especially about avoiding travel, or excuse me, kind of the back-to-back kind of scenario, I think is really important. If they do end up in the play-in, you want to end up in that 7 spot, right? Not in the 8 spot. You're talking about potentially having to play Oklahoma City. We might as well, say Cancun on 3, the way Oklahoma City is look. Although the Lakers, did, give them a pretty good black eye the other night. When you think about what Tuomas Isalo has been able to do in the last several games, I think you can find some encouragement, but I think the real test will be, how do you handle these 2 teams out west that you are gunning for that final 6 spot in the Western Conference. So we'll see how that goes. The last thing, this is not necessarily on our plan for the day, but Ja Morant did get fined that $75,000 for the gesture he made to the gun gesture that he made that he was warned not to do against the Miami Heat. What do you think about that? Did it feel like defiance to you, or was it like just Ja being Ja? You think he even thought about it when he did it?
I mean, I feel like probably. I think obviously because that was kind of the story of the NBA the day before that, or the day of that game, was like the fine and Buddy Hield in the game before and all that stuff. And obviously that speaks to where we are at the NBA, that the playoffs are starting in a week, and we were talking about 3-point celebrations all day before the game. But I think he did. Obviously, he didn't play in that game on Saturday, so we didn't get to see if he was going to do it again. Look, everyone's already talked about it a lot. Like, people across the NBA have done that celebration, including that night. Also, like, I think we saw LeBron James doing it in that Warriors against Lakers game, and we saw a lot of other players doing it. So it's not new. Obviously, we know all the history with Ja Morant and guns and stuff like that, and so that's why the NBA is doing what they're doing. As long as if he does it again, then obviously the NBA is going to again have to weigh in, and we'll be talking about it again. If he doesn't, I feel like hopefully we can all move on, but you never really know, so we'll see on that one.
Yeah, the NBA feels this strongly about it. We may be talking about a potential rule change or something if they really don't want to fine people all the time. Anyway, let's move on. Jonah and I are going to take a little bit of a break. Coming up, we'll get into Jonah's bread and butter, that is Tigers football. We'll hear what he's got to say about where the Tigers are and what he wants to see before the spring game later this month. Stick around.
On Weather Impact Alert Days, stay informed, prepared, and connected with ABC 24 and 24 Plus. Coverage that alerts you to what's coming and how it will impact you. Watch extended weather coverage on 24 Plus. The 24 Plus TV app. Streaming 24/7 local news from the team you trust on your time.
Rain showers through the day today, and we're starting.
Track how the weather will impact your day.
Rain coming in tonight into tomorrow.
Extended, continuous coverage of breaking news, live from the scene. Go deeper with in-depth interviews and exclusive reporting. All the local news you need, live or on demand. 24 Plus, complete coverage of your local news, weather, and more.
Here comes our first batch of rain.
Some severe thunderstorms and even several tornado warnings.
I think the bigger issue is going to be the wind gusts. So you start getting some branches knocked around. You could definitely see some power outages today. Those storms could pack a punch.
It's not just the thunderstorms, it's the fact that this low pressure is so strong.
How big that storm system was.
On Weather Impact Alert Days, stream extended coverage on 24 Plus. Download on your TV and watch for free. When news breaks, watch 24 Plus. See the story as it's happening. Be on the scene, faster than ever before. Live updates from the team you trust. Stream breaking news on 24+. Download free on your TV now.
Welcome back to the show. My guy, Jonah Dillon of the Commercial Appeal, tapping in with me today. Got to talk a little football, at least shortly, even though we're not really in that kind of time of the year. Spring football underway for the Memphis Tigers. We're through a couple of weeks now. Memphis coming off an 11-win season, but have to replace quarterback Seth Hennigan, who was the 4-year starter. They will have only one starter returning on defense. That's William Whitmore Jr. Spring game will be April the 26th. That's a little over 2 weeks from today. Jonah, you cover this team extensively the last couple of years. What are some of the biggest questions the Tigers are trying to answer here in the spring?
Yeah, I mean, who's going to be on the field, right? Like you just said, basically, we talked about it throughout last season. Like the senior class that they had, obviously Seth Hennigan, kind of the headliner, but there were so many guys last year who played key roles, not just last season, but really for the past couple of years. And last season kind of felt like the end of something. And this year feels like the start of something new, and we don't really know what it's going to be. And so it starts at quarterback, right? Brendan Lewis is a guy who came in from Nevada as a transfer. He's got extensive experience as a starter, and definitely somebody who right now is kind of the front runner to be Memphis' starting quarterback when they kick off next season. And it's going to be weird for everybody when, you know, the game starts and somebody other than Seth Hennigan, I was going to say his number, but obviously he changes number every year, so it doesn't even matter. Number 2 will be back there, you know, at quarterback, but number 2 was back there in 2023 for Memphis also. So, but yeah, I mean, I would say right now, offensive coordinator Tim Cramsey told me before the season started that Brandon Lewis had to step up in the quarterback competition. It makes sense considering basically everybody else in that room has never played a really meaningful snap. Harris Boyd, who was the backup last year, played I think one meaningful snap last year when Seth Hennigan went out with an injury, and so there's really no experience outside of him. He's started at Colorado, he started at Nevada, and he's obviously the front runner, but I think that's the story because obviously fans are very excited about A.J. Hill. He's one of the highest ranked recruits Memphis has ever gotten. It was a huge story nationally when he committed to Memphis last summer. Obviously, a lot of schools, Florida was after him. A lot of schools across the country wanted him, and he chose to come to Memphis. And so people are excited. At the same time, this is a 17-year-old kid who's just arrived this spring, and it's still very raw. He's somebody who a lot of people are excited about, but at the same time, he's kind of a project-type player in the sense that he's got a lot to learn, but he's obviously got the intangibles. And so kind of following that will be a big story, not just in the spring, but throughout the summer to see how he develops, even though Brandon Lewis right now seems like the guy who's most likely to be the starter when the season kicks off in August.
How do you feel like Ryan Silverfield balances that tightrope? I'm sure part of the pitch that he was given to Hill was, hey, Seth Hennigan left quite the legacy here. He started as a freshman. You have an opportunity to do something similar. I'm sure he thought, the keys to the car could potentially be his in year one. How do you think they, do that balancing act of, evaluating where he is and if he could be the starter day one moving forward, or going with the competition and the guy who does have more experience in Brandon Lewis?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely a competition, right? There's no, it's not done by any means, and so A.J. Hill will have every opportunity, as will everybody else in that room, to set themselves apart and prove that they should be the starter. I think, obviously, the conversation with him is, like you said, I think that was part of the pitch for AJ to come here was, look, Seth Hennigan started as a true freshman and held onto the job for 4 years. But at the same time, I think Ryan Silverfield and the rest of the coaching staff, they know that when Seth Hennigan started, there were some growing pains. And this is a roster and a team that really is primed to compete for the college football playoff for that group of 5 spot every single year. And so do you want to spend a year with growing pains working on a new quarterback, especially in this day and age of college football, even in the past couple of years, since Seth Hennigan got here? Someone has a really good year as a starter at a group of 5 school, they're probably not going to play for that team the next year, right, with the transfer portal. It's remarkable that Seth Hennigan stayed in Memphis for 4 years, especially with the opportunities that he had, after his 3rd year. And so even if your goal is to develop somebody, there's no guarantee that they're going to continue to stay there. And so I think you have to weigh that when you're making decisions of what gives us the best chance to win this year. even though you're trying to develop guys, and Memphis is still trying to do that. There's a lot of players across the roster who have been at this program multiple years and are going to play a bigger role this year. And I know that Ryan Storefield and the whole staff, they want to still be a developmental program, but at the same time, you got to do you got to do what's in the team's best interest to win every single year when you have those expectations. And this is a team that's probably going to be picked to win the AAC preseason again, and so they've got to figure out what the best way to kind of navigate that is in the short term. And so obviously coming in, you just look at it on paper with Brendan Lewis, and it seems like he's obviously got that experience, but look, they're the ones watching them in practice every day. And so I think we'll know more when we get closer to the start of the season.
So we got to talk about the defensive side of the ball as well. You had the article about William Whitmore Jr. deciding to enter the transfer portal, but then stick with the Memphis Tigers. He will be the lone returning starter on the defensive side of the ball. What are some of the bigger questions that you think Jordan Hank, as the defensive coordinator, is trying to answer as far as what that defensive unit looks like? You think linebacker will be one of the biggest competition spots, yeah?
Yeah. First of all, Whitlow, how dare you? Second of all, I gotta be here for the fact checking.
Fact checking is
but
important.
Like you said,
that is on me.
No, I'm never gonna get invited back. But you know, when I went out, it was a fun time. Look, he's the starter. He's going to be one of the starters. He's going to be kind of the focal point of the defense. And then in the back, Cortland Marsh was somebody who was kind of slated to be a starter at the beginning of last season, was injured, came back towards the end of the year and played really well. And so I would expect him to be another returning starter, sort of. Obviously, he didn't start like the season opener, but he's a safety, and so he'll be in there too. Aside from that, it's a lot of spots up for grabs. And basically this defense lost. The linebacking core was the heart of the team. Obviously, we know what Chandler Martin did last year. Elijah Herring and Matt Hudson both had really good seasons too. Everybody's gone. Chandler Martin left early for the draft. Elijah Herring transferred, went to Florida State. Matt Hudson was out of eligibility. And so you need new linebackers. And Jordan Hankins, the kind of thing about his defense is he wants to play as many linebackers as he can. And so he brought in a lot of guys in the transfer portal. And that's one of the biggest stories, especially on the defensive side of the ball, is his opportunity to assess all of these players defensively and who's going to play the most. Sam Brumfield, Drew Watts, Everett Rousseau, a lot of guys. Jaden Flaker, who was here last year. There's a lot of names in that room, and I think that's kind of the open position in terms of spring ball. Is like there's 3 spots at least up for grabs in that room, and he's trying to see who's going to kind of rise in that competition. And then a lot of the other competitions too. I mean, cornerback, they lost both their starters, lost a lot of depth guys too, and so there's been a lot of new faces. I think that's going to be a big thing. Even in the spring game, is like trying to point out new numbers of guys who are playing defense, because there's not going to be a lot of faces that fans are going to recognize. And it's going to be interesting to see who wins those competitions as we get closer to the start.
Jonah Dillon, Tigers beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, keeping up with all these important storylines and keeping you guys informed. Make sure you read his work over there at the CA. Jonah, I appreciate your services, my friend. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, let's jump into some other things. The Memphis Showboats gave it a fight, speaking of spring football, but fell short on the road this past Saturday, losing 17-12 to the D.C. Defenders right here on ABC 24. E.J. Perry's fourth-quarter touchdown run gave Memphis the lead, but D.C. answered quick. A deep shot set up the go-ahead score, and a trick play, 2-point conversion, made it a 5-point game. Boats had a shot late, driving in the field goal range, but the 43-yarder was blocked, and that was what we call ball game. Jonathan Adams balled out, 9 catches, 128 yards, his second week of having excellent play. Kept in the defense, was able to keep it close, but the Showboats dropped to 0-2. They'll be back home Saturday, taking on the Houston Roughnecks at 1:30 at Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium. Penny Hardaway just landed his first transfer of the offseason, and it's a familiar name in the AAC. Former Temple guard Quante Berry is headed to Memphis. The 6'4" Tennessee native announced his commitment on Instagram after an official visit last month. Berry averaged over 10 points and 4 boards per game last season, starting in 21 of 28 games for the Owls. It's a big jump from his redshirt freshman year where he barely cracked 3 points a game. Now he becomes the 9th AAC transfer Penny Hardaway has picked up over the last 4 off seasons. Meanwhile, Memphis still waiting on decisions from P.J. Haggerty, their star guard, Dante Harris, the backup, and Boona Kibi. And Dane Danger is reportedly seeking an extra year of eligibility through a waiver from the NCAA. The roster's in flux, but Berry's a commitment that marks another step in Hardaway's full-on rebuild once again. History was made on the ice this weekend as Alex Ovechkin became the new king of goal scorers. The 39-year-old broke Wayne Gretzky's record Sunday against the New York Islanders, setting his 895th career goal, and he's done it against a record 183 different goalies. It's an NHL record many thought was going to be unbreakable, including Ovechkin. I mean, he said so himself about 9 years ago, and Ovechkin did it in the same number of games as Gretzky, 1,487. Gretzky himself called Ovechkin a man who truly was born to put the puck in the net, and I would agree. A men's champion will be crowned tonight in the NCAA. Florida Gators and Houston Cougars set to clash in the national championship game after surviving the Final Four. Florida knocked off Auburn to make their first title game appearance since 2007 when they won back-to-back national titles. Houston took down Duke in an incredible comeback and is looking to claim its first ever championship since 1984. The game tips off tonight in San Antonio. The UConn women's basketball team woke up as national champions this morning, and you saw it all right here on ABC 24. They took down South Carolina in the title game yesterday, 82-59, just an absolute destruction of Dawn Staley. UConn led most of the way, never looked back. Top WNBA prospect Paige Beckers wraps up her college career with 477 tournament points. That's third most all time. After the win, she called it one of the proudest moments of her life.
An overwhelming sense of gratitude for everything that's happened through the ups and downs. I wouldn't trade it for the world. To be rewarded with something like this, you can't really even put it into words.
All right, so let's talk about the best thing I saw this weekend. Pretty easily, it's got to go to the UConn Huskies. Gino Auriemma hoisting title number 12. And let's be real, he might be the greatest head coach of all time right there in Storrs, Connecticut. Sunday's 82-59 beatdown of South Carolina was not just a statement win. It ended a 9-year title drought and proved Gino still got it even in the age of NIL and all these commercials and athletes making money. 12 national championships, 1,250 career wins, an .883 win percentage, the most dominant women's basketball program ever. And it all runs through him despite all of the fantastic stars that he's had. Stewie, Maya Moore, and the rest. And here's the wild part. UConn might just be getting started all over again. They've got AZ Fudd back and freshman Sarah Strong looking like the next would-be superstar. Don't be surprised if Gino's chasing number 13 this time next year. The best thing I saw, the GOAT doing what the GOAT does. All right, that's all we have for you on the 24th floor in this edition. Appreciate the time today and the help from all those who make this thing pop. Thank you to Jonah Dillon of the Commercial Appeal for joining the show. We'll be back on Thursday, but for now, we are out.